The time is finally here, Brewers fans. It is Fan Feature Friday, an episode, a show that I have been looking forward to about 3 weeks here since I have first announced it. The messages have been insane. You guys answered. I got two guests joining me. Let's get this thing started, shall we? Do not go anywhere. Stay tuned in. You are Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Brewers fans, welcome back into the Locked On Brewers podcast. Thank you for always making Locked On Brewers your first listen each and every day. Do not forget, you get tired of me saying this, but I got to remind you, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That's right, Apple, Google, Spotify. Of course, there are so many others. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Facebook at Locked On Brewers. And again, we are on YouTube. I cannot stress this enough. We are less than 100 subscribers from 1,000. You guys have been so supportive over there on YouTube. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you're not over there on YouTube, if you're not subscribed, just go ahead and hit that search bar. Search at Locked On Brewers. By now, you should know me by now. It's been about a month. I am your host, Brandon Snide. Like you, call myself a fan with a mic in front of my face, a lifelong and diehard Milwaukee Brewers fan, actually recording this podcast with these fine gentlemen just minutes away from American Family Field. I would hope if you're listening to this podcast and if you're a fan of the Brewers, you would know that that is home to our Milwaukee Brewers. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_Snide. And again, I cannot stress this enough, how much I appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to sit here and talk about the Milwaukee Brewers in January, when really there isn't a whole lot of news, although the Brewers did sign a free agent yesterday, but I'll digress on that. We heard about that yesterday. As always, Locked On Brewers is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like you guys heard at the top of the show here, I think I first announced this about 3 weeks ago, roughly. I think it was a week or so before Christmas. I was sitting in my basement. If you're on YouTube, you can see behind me, staring at some of the things on my wall, dreaming about how much money I've spent. Maybe dreaming is kind of a wrong adjective there, but nonetheless, I was trying to figure out how to figure out a fun show, an interactive show, an innovative way to get the fans of this show, because you guys make this podcast what it is. It's not me. I'm just a fan that's going behind a microphone and yelling, as my wife likes to call it, about what the Milwaukee Brewers are or are not doing. So I sat there and I thought, how could I get fans? And I thought about maybe a Google Voice phone. Maybe you could leave a voicemail. But I said, you know what? I want something a little bit more interactive. Bring them on. So that's what we are doing. Joining me now are two diehard Milwaukee Brewers fans. If you're listening to this podcast, they're just like you, David and Levi. Gentlemen, you are the first fans on this show. I believe, at least I should probably check that, but I think you're the first fans on this show. We'll start with you, David. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. How about yourself?
It's January, David. It's Milwaukee. It's cloudy. It's dark by 4:30. You and I have this problem, but Levi, on the other hand, may not have this problem. He's the other fan joining the show. Levi, how you doing?
I am great. It was 70 degrees in North Carolina today.
See, David, this is what we got. David, this is what we're dealing with here. You and I are local to Milwaukee. You were just at the Bucks game, right?
Yep.
You saw Giannis drop 55. How was that? Because I'm jealous. So I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, it was great. My family has been blessed to have season tickets the last 4 years, so only second to Game 6 being there in person. But anytime you can see a career high, especially from the caliber of Giannis, is amazing to witness.
Absolutely. So, Levi, I'm curious for you. So we were talking before the show. I was in the Army. I was stationed in North Carolina. We had talked a little bit during the start of the show, or before the start of the show, how much I loved my time in North Carolina. 70 degrees right now. Were you kidding me?
Yeah. It was high 60s. It's sunny, not a cloud in the sky. It's been ugly. Like Christmas Eve, it got down to like single digits. So I was feeling the Wisconsin weather.
I feel like that was I feel like that was everywhere though, right?
Yeah,
I think everywhere in the country. I think the Packers played in Miami and it was like in the 40s. It was the coldest game in Miami since the 80s.
Yeah.
So it was.
We had a couple of real cold days, but other than that, no, it's been like high 50s and 60s.
Okay. So we'll get into this. I wanted to just, for those tuning in, wanted to bring in fans that listen to the show, that are supportive of the show, that support me. I can't thank them enough for joining me, for reaching out. And again, there's so many of you that have reached out, and I will get to you guys. I promise. This is going to be an all off season, I guess, thing that we're going to run here on the Locked On Brewers podcast. We'll do it every Friday. So you will get your shot on here. I will have 2 each week, starting obviously today and then going until we get to spring training. I think even then we'll go. We might even do it throughout the season, really, because I think it's a ton of fun. So, David, I'm going to start with you. You are born and raised in Wisconsin. Is that correct?
Yep, except for the year and a half I went to Indiana for school.
Okay, so Midwest, so you're familiar with the area. All right, so what makes you a Brewers fan? Like, what did you do? Do you remember some of your like early memories of being a Milwaukee Brewers fan?
Yeah, so just a stereotypical born in the Milwaukee area, and growing up, you got to pick a team, and it just happened to be the closest team. And so I picked the Brewers and been a fan ever since, through up and downs. And one of the earliest memories going to then Miller Park, I don't even remember what year, but my family was sitting by the visitors' bullpen. And
Okay.
as little kids, you all line up and try to get a ball from either the pitcher, the catcher, a coach or something. And all these kids don't get the ball, and they all go away back to their seats. And then the bullpen coach is like, that one kid right there can get a ball, and it's me. And so he tosses up a ball, and here I am where all like 30 other kids don't get a ball, and then I happen to get the one.
Do you remember who it was from?
No, it was one of their random coaches. I don't know if it was like the actual bullpen coach.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I have a funny story. I think you guys, if you've listened, you probably heard Jeff Cirillo hit me with a ball one time. It was, I believe it was at American or then Miller Park when it first opened. I'm pretty sure it was. And the guy behind me, I was like 8, 9, 10, and there was a ground ball. It wasn't like it wasn't being malicious or anything, but hit a ground ball, foul ball, hit me in the stomach. The guy, I was on camera. The paramedics came down and the guy behind me took the ball and he wouldn't give it to me. And I was like 8 or 9. So I'm still reaching out to Jeff Cirillo to see if he can redeem my childhood misfortunes. But Levi, what about you, sir? You from Wisconsin, or I mean, you live in North Carolina? Are you from Wisconsin? Are you from the South? Did you just randomly become a Brewers fan? Let me hear a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I'm North Carolina, born and raised.
Okay.
I am generally a Philly sports fandom person, big Flyers fan. My dad is from that area, and so
passionate fan base, man.
Yes,
passionate.
Yeah. So I grew up in a Phillies household, but I never really cared that much about baseball. I liked playing baseball as a kid, but didn't really care that much about watching it professionally. And then of course I, went through the phase of just not liking anything that your, parents like. And then maybe about 5 years ago, I decided I was going to get back into baseball. The Flyers were terrible. So I was like, I need another sport to watch. And I kind of picked the Brewers out of a hat just about. And it was kind of an easy decision because I went through and I was like, growing up in a Phillies household, that's still residual in my head. So I can't be a Braves fan. I can't be, an Orioles, or the Nationals weren't even a thing when I was a kid. I can't be them. And I'm not going to pick the Phillies because that feels too easy. And then I just started kind of going through the list. I was like, who is a good team that isn't like a top 3, like, a recent championship winner, because I can't be a bandwagon fan, but who's not a bottom feeder seller team. So I'd had that middle, 10 or 12 teams. And I was like, who can I pick? And then I saw Brewers, and at the time they were Miller Park. And I was like, I mean, I like beer, so let's go.
So for those that are not aware, and it's probably all of you other than Levi is such a fan of the Locked On Brewers podcast, fan of the Milwaukee Brewers. He actually just created a Twitter handle just to DM myself, the show, to get on this podcast. So I had to reach out back to you. we're going to get off topic here for a second. But I'm curious.
Yeah.
Have you gone? Are you frequently on Twitter now? Have you experienced the Twittersphere yet? I call it the dark web.
Yeah.
There's
So
100.
so I was on Twitter for a while, and
Okay.
I got off of it like a year and a half ago. Like I got off of pretty much all social media, and then all Twitter does a thing where if your account is deactivated for more than a certain amount of time, it just gets
Right.
deleted permanently. And so I was like, well, and then I started listening to your show right when you took over, I believe.
Okay.
And so you started talking about the Fan Fridays, and I was like, man, I would like to do that. I was like, am I really going to have to create a whole new Twitter account to do this?
I mean, if you're on Facebook, I mean, we got Facebook too.
I'm not on Facebook either. Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not on anything. So I was like,
you're one of the 1%ers, I guess.
Yeah, so Twitter seemed like the easiest thing to create a new account and hit you up that way. That felt like the least intrusive way to do it.
Fans got to know that's true. That's true fandom right there for Levi, for a guy that's, from, I guess, sort of new to the fan base.
Yeah.
Real quick before I switch over to David, I'm curious from you, Levi. You've experienced, and you currently experience, the Philadelphia fandom, which is a rare breed of individuals. No offense right there. Don't take that the wrong way.
Yeah.
They're just rare. I think most Philly fans would agree.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Brewers fan base? I'm curious. So I have all these questions for you guys, but I always find ones off the top of my head. I'm curious.
Yeah.
Is it, I think toxic is the wrong word. I think every fan base can be toxic, but what is your opinion of the Milwaukee Brewers fan base thus far for yourself?
That's an interesting question. Yeah. So Philly, and I am a diehard Philadelphia Flyers hockey fan. So I do have that part of me somewhere deep in my heart. Philly prides itself on being a pretty angry, and no holds barred sort of fandom, but they also are a very passionate fan base.
Sure.
In my experience, so this past season was the first season that I started watching the Brewers like legit. I watched over 100 games this season. And Brewers fan base, and maybe it's a Milwaukee thing, a Wisconsin Midwest thing, but like y'all are polite.
David, we take that as a compliment. That's a Midwest thing.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing, because I've told you, I was stationed in the Army, or I was in the Army. I was stationed all over, and it is a real thing. Like it is a real thing. You do not get it everywhere. There's some, like, so I was stationed in Georgia. They were nice in Georgia, had that Southern hospitality. North Carolina was a hit or miss. I was stationed in New York. Forget it. I was stationed in Colorado, forget it. And the Midwest it's a little bit different. I mean, the South is comparable.
Yeah.
North Carolina was up and down, because North Carolina is kind of weird. It has like that big city. You can go up to the mountains. You can go down to the ocean. Like they got a little bit of everything going on in North Carolina. It's a little bit all over. David, you were lived in Indiana. Is the Midwest nice thing in Indiana as well?
Yeah, I thought so. If you ask my dad, though, he'll have the complete opposite. Because the one time he came and visited me in college, he was all upset because people weren't like holding the door open for him or saying thank you. So I don't know if that was just a college thing and people might be like half awake from partying last night, but he was not happy about that.
Cool. Well, I mean, I guess it is real then, but well, that was a fun first segment with our two first Brewers fans. We've heard from the guys. We've heard what makes them Brewers fans. We even learned about when they became Brewers fans. And for David, right when he was born. See, David, did you have a choice? Because when I was born into my family, they didn't give me a choice. It was, hey, happy birthday. Here's your Brewers onesie, and this is it. There is no other way. Was that like it for you, or were they like, here you go. You can kind of be a fan of what you want. For me, it was just not really have a choice.
There was definitely a choice. Packers were not, but
Packers. Yep, that was another one.
Yeah,
I mean, you could. My dad would tell me, he goes, you can root for whoever you want. Just remember where you live. So I was like, all right, well, let's go Brewers, go Bucks, go Badgers, go Marquette, go Packers. So that's funny. All right, well, we've heard a little bit about what makes them Brewers fans, how they became Brewers fans. I'm curious what some of their cooler memories of Milwaukee Brewers are, maybe some of their favorite players, what they look forward to the season coming up in 2023. And then we're going to get into where they feel about the offseason thus far for the Milwaukee Brewers. But before we do all of that, are you guys looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all that fat and calories at the start of the new year? Maybe you're trying to lose some weight, then you got to try Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know for myself, my goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. Cheese curds are just too good, so I'm having a hard time. But if you're like me and you want to eat healthier, but just don't want to compromise the taste, then man, I've got the thing for you guys. You got to try Built Bars. With Built Bars, healthy is an actual taste. They are so freaking good. I thought it was a candy bar the first time I had one. They are so delicious. You won't know what's good for you. Perfect for the New Year's resolution for those going to the gym. The gyms are packed to start off the new year. You got to try a Built Bar. What makes them so good, you ask? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. You heard me talk about it. I thought it was a candy bar. I'm not kidding you. Real freaking chocolate. And they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. I'm not sure how exactly they do it, but these bars taste like a candy bar. And the best part about it, they maintain amazing macros. And that's even better when they're healthy. Only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar. I'm trying to count the sugar. You don't realize how much sugar is in things. So having only 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein, unbelievable. And now we've talked about it on this show. Usually you got to go to builtbars.com. Now you do not have to. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk up to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're even close to a Sam's Club, which I think most people probably are, run in and grab a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. Thank you for making Locked On Brewers your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On MLB prospects. Brewers fans, we have a lot of prospects that are being discussed. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he is going deep on the MLB stars tomorrow. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcoming in David and Levi, the first 2 fans into the Locked On Brewers podcast for the first time ever. We're going to call it Fan Feature Friday. Maybe there's a better name out there. If you think of one, let me know. We chatted a little bit, gentlemen, about some of your early memories, how you became a Brewers fan. I'm curious what maybe your favorite player either was or currently is. And Levi, you're the newer fan out of the 3 of us. So I'm curious who your favorite player is, was, could be.
Oh yeah. It's a no-brainer for me. It's a fellow large, balded, bearded man, Rowdy Tellez.
fan favorite.
Yeah, that man is absolutely great. Genuinely, started watching the Brewers deeply this season, and Rowdy is what made me fall in love with this team. Like, he is just so much fun. He had the couple of mic'd ups on the MLB channel, and he just seemed incredibly fun. But there's one specific moment. I can't find it. No idea what game it's from. One specific moment where I'm like, yes, this is my team. It was some nothing game in the middle of like May or June, and he completely demolished a homer, and he looked at it for a second, and then he just looked over to the Brewers dugout and just gave a look of like, yeah, that's gone. And from that point forward, I was done. I was like, this is my team.
Okay. So Rowdy Tellez, I think he's really turning into be a lot of people's favorite player. He's up there for me. I'm still riding the Yelich train. I'm hoping that gets turned around here for his production in 2023. David, what about you? What is it? Let me ask you this real quick, David. What's the player you remember as a child being your favorite? Like going deep into one being a child. I'll start with, for me, it was Jeremy Burnitz, and that's probably, I might be dating myself there a little bit. That was like mid to late 90s, I think. Jeff Cirillo was up there as well. But what about you, David? What like early favorite player? And then you can go into who you currently have as your favorite player.
Yeah, so my first that of course, when you're a kid, you can't remember fully, but when I first can remember actually watching games, my favorite was always Jeff Jenkins.
Okay, yep.
I don't know why, he just the way he played.
Because he looked like Brett Favre.
Well, funny enough, that's my favorite football player of all time.
See that?
So maybe
There you go.
then I was a big Orlando Arcia fan.
Okay.
Just the glove work, and he actually hit a home run, I think 2 games where I was at. So kind of this correlated nice. And then funny enough, current favorite is also Rowdy Tellez. I just always
I just made you guys friends. You guys are just your friends now.
Yeah, and I'm waiting because when Ethan Small comes up, he's actually gonna become my favorite. I've just been a fan of him from college all the way through the minors. I've been following him.
So, what minor games do you attend? Are you a big fan of the minor, David? Are you a big fan of the minor league baseball?
I'm a fan of watching on TV. I've never actually been to an official game. The Timber Rattlers are not too far, but I've never been to one of their games.
I haven't either, and I'm going to try to put that on my list this year because I think I should have went last year when Jackson was there, but I'm going to try to go this year. What is the a prospect? You guys have heard me. It's the off season, so you've heard me mention prospects probably 100 times by now. David, what's the one prospect you're looking out for this year that you got your eye on?
Well, piggybacking a little bit, of course, Ethan Small, but I've officially jumped on the Jackson hype train. I hoping last year wasn't a fluke and he just destroyed the lower levels of the lower levels, but well, I'm waiting to see what he does in AAA and hopefully coming up soon and giving the outfield a little bit more of a punch with Mitchell.
Yeah, he's the one prospect that I think, as far as hype goes, like you recall Ryan Braun, Prince Fielder. I remember those. I mean, I was still in high school at that time. But I remember them guys getting called up. I remember the hype, and this is before social media was really a thing. You know, the hype behind those two. And then I remember the hype between those guys and then Keston Hiura coming up, which was what, 2019, 2018, 2019, when he was in the major leagues in 2019. He was coming up between those years, 2017, 2018. So I remember his hype and his offensive production. So let's hope Jackson has a little bit of a different major league projection than when Keston is currently at, but I'm still rooting for Keston. Levi, I'm curious for you. You're in North Carolina. Now, North Carolina does have a lot of baseball.
Yeah.
Minor league affiliates are there's a ton of, I shouldn't say a ton, but there's a handful of them down there in North Carolina. I'm curious what kind of games, if you do attend at all, do you go down to any of those games out there?
So it's funny. I somehow am the only one of the three of us right now who has seen Jackson Churio play in person.
Coming on the podcast, I bring you on. You're the first guest, and now I have to kick. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to kick you out. But okay, so talk to me about that.
Yeah, so there's the Carolina League, and I think it used to be low A, and now it's just single A.
Was it Coastal Carolina? I think it was Coastal Carolina, right? No, the Mudcats.
Carolina Mudcats. Yeah,
that's it. Yep.
And then they're about 2 hours from me, and then the Down East Wood Ducks, formerly the Kinston Indians, they are only an hour and change away from me.
Okay.
And so I had an opportunity to go. I went to a couple of Wood Ducks games, but I had an opportunity to go when the Mudcats were in town. So I got to see Jackson hit a homer and do his thing in the outfield, and it was a sight to see.
Well, everybody now that's listening to this podcast, Levi, it's his first time and his last time on this podcast because I'm jealous. No, I'm totally kidding. I was saying when he was in Appleton, I should have went. I bought a Harley last summer. I talked about it. I love fishing. My summers like fly by in Wisconsin. We're not as lucky as Levi here, David, but we get about 2 months of warm weather. So you got to enjoy it while you can. So, all right. We have got to know these two fans for a little bit now. We've heard where they're from. We've heard how they became Brewers fans, what their favorite players are, who they got their eye on. One of them saw Jackson Churio play. It isn't me. It wasn't David, but that's okay. I'm curious now heading into the offseason for these Milwaukee Brewers. It's been a busy offseason. We have, I can't even keep count on the top of my head right now, maybe 5, 6 trades for new president of baseball operations, Matt Arnold. So I wanted to end the show talking a little bit of baseball. We've kind of talked about baseball throughout the show. We've kind of got off track a little bit, but I'm curious where these guys stand, where their opinions and where their feelings are for this offseason for the Crew. It's time to start asking the hard questions. David and Levi, two diehard Milwaukee Brewers fans, are joining me for the first ever Fan Feature Friday, a event we're going to run throughout the offseason, and I'm thinking about maybe throughout the season. We'll see how with the feedback I get, but these two guys have been absolutely tremendous. All right, gentlemen, enough of the compliments for you. We've heard a little bit about you. We got to know you a little bit, know where you're from, how you became Brewers fan, favorite players, all that good stuff. I'm curious. Now, we have a little bit of, I don't want to say breaking news, but there's news that there's no Fan Fest, no on deck in Milwaukee this year, which, David, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we're going on about 2 years, 3 years. I think the COVID year, obviously, and then didn't have it last year. They don't have it this year. So we'll put that aside. You can talk about that if you want, but I'm curious. And David, I'll start with you. Your thoughts so far on the offseason that started with missing the playoffs by a game, David Stern stepping down, losing Brent Suter, fan favorite, I would say, trading Jesse Winker, trading Colton Wong, trading for William Contreras, signing Wade Miley. It's a great time to pick out this podcast because we haven't been short of content thus far. But I'm curious, David, we'll start with you. What you feel like the Milwaukee Brewers have done so far in this offseason?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you could even go back to the trade deadline with trading Hader. It's kind of been a whirlwind since then.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
We trade arguably the best closer in baseball, if not at least top three. And the team all of a sudden feels like it went off a cliff. I know that's used often, but it was true. And then this offseason, we have gotten a lot of good players in, but also have shipped a lot of good players out or just not re-signed them at all. And there's still some pretty big holes that the team hasn't filled, at least from the outside. We have the players in the organization that can fill it, but the question is, what are they going to do now that they have this larger role? Sure. Or just coming up from the minors and not ever playing in the MLB at all?
Yeah, it's it's an off season where when I took over the podcast, I said it was just a lot of more questions than answers. Some of them are getting answered. We have our catcher of the future. I feel like we have 1,500 starting pitchers, but again, you just wait for the offseason to play itself out. And I'm reminded every day on the dark web that it is only January 6th. So I get it. We have time. Levi, I'll go over to you and your thoughts here in 2023. And the offseason obviously started in coming short of the playoffs and like David touched on the Josh Hader trade. What are your thoughts on new president of baseball operations, Matt Arnold, the job he has done, maybe the ownership? Where your thoughts are right now? Where do you sit with the Milwaukee Brewers?
Sure. So it's been interesting because this is, coming from the hockey world, that is a league with a hard salary cap. Sure. And so obviously big money spending free agents isn't really so much of a thing. That is
how it should be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
If you're a Brewers fan, you agree.
Yeah. And so I, of course, was disappointed missing the playoffs. Of course, the year that I finally pick it up and really dive deep is like
maybe you're bad luck.
Yeah, I mean, miss it for the first time in like 5 years or whatever. Yeah. But I will say that a lot of my I still have worries because I just always have worries about any sports team I follow. But a lot of my worries about the future of the team, not just 2023, but the future going forward, I did kind of get assuaged a little bit with the William Contreras trade. That did feel good in the moment, and it still feels good. I think he's going to be a huge contributor for us, whether it's a catcher or a DH. I imagine probably a mix of both is what it seems like. But I think there is going to be a lot of faith put into the kids. It's weird to say kids when a lot of these people coming up are 25, 26, 27 years old. But I think there's going to be a lot put on the shoulders of the prospects. But I think their farm system is good enough that they could probably handle the pressure. I do think that with no more moves between now and opening day, I think the 2023 Brewers are a better team than they were at the end of last season, and I do think they improve their record and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'll see about playoffs. Yeah, we'll see. The division's going to be tough.
Yeah,
I know Fangraphs hasn't projected to win the division. They haven't projected to win 90 games. Maybe if healthy, sure. I'll ask you this, Levi, and then I'm going to jump back to David. What do you think happens with Brandon Woodruff, Willie Adames, Corbin Burns, again, signing Wade Miley? We mentioned it earlier in the show. I mentioned it yesterday's show where they signed him for 1 year, $4.5 million, which I still think is pending. I don't think he's technically cleared his physical, and again, had injuries last year. But I'm curious where you stand, Levi, with those three. Trade one, trade both, trade all, keep one. What do you think happens with that?
So I'll lock it in right now on this dated podcast. That my prediction of what does happen is Willie gets signed to an extension during the season. Woodruff gets signed to an extension or contract by the end of the season, and Corbin Burns gets traded. That is my prediction. Is that what I want to happen? Absolutely not. But I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mentioned that on the earlier episode of this week. David, your thoughts on what do you think the Brewers finish? We'll start. Where do you think the Brewers finish in the National League Central?
Yeah, so for me, I really want to say as a fan, of course, they're going to win the Central, but I don't know how much faith I put into the prospects. I know they're highly ranked and everything, but when you're young, there is big gaps jumping up these different levels. And some of these players in the majors have played for 10, 11, 12 years, and then they know the little minute things that they can do to get the advantage where these younger players might not, because they're caught up in the lights, or they're like, oh my goodness, look at all these fans. And so I'm probably putting them behind the Cardinals, maybe catching a wild card, but I think the Cardinals, unfortunately, probably get the division.
Yeah, that's kind of where for right now. And I'm with Levi as well. The William Contreras, I was a big criticizer, and I'll continue to be because I'm a Milwaukee Brewers fan. I can do that. Criticize what the offseason was prior to that William Contreras trade, and I kind of put my vision on straight. I don't mind. I thought the Wade Miley signing was nice, low risk. I mean, you're not paying a whole lot of money. I didn't care for the Claudio trade. A minor league deal with a major league camp invite. David, we'll go to you, and then we'll wrap up the show. What do you think? We heard Levi's thoughts on the Corbin Burns, Willie Adames, Brandon Woodruff. What do you think that plays out? How do you think that looks going forward?
Yeah, so I think, kind of like Levi and you both said, I think Willie gets done first, whether it be before the season or during the season. And then with the pitchers, as much as I want them both back, I kind of think it's going to have to be at the middle of the season, see how the team's doing, and whichever direction they're going, if you think you can get good prospects back, and then we're like third or fourth in the Central, then maybe it is time to trade both of them and get much more prospects back and kind of rebuild for a little bit longer. But I think if one of them does get an extension, I agree it would be Woodruff. He's going to be the cheaper option, and if Burns hits free agency, who knows how much he can get. And being a small market team, I don't think the Brewers can compete with like the Yankees or the Red Sox or someone along that caliber.
See, the thing that worries me, and here's why I think it plays out, and you guys have heard me probably say this, I think you trade Burns, and I don't agree with it, because I think when you got a guy like that and you got the ace of staff and arguably the best pitcher your franchise has ever seen, I think you keep him. Like, that's a no-brainer, but I don't think they're going to be anywhere close when it comes to money and years. Willie Adames scares me because the shortstop market is, and we're waiting on the Carlos Correa medical concerns, I suppose, whatever that may be. Eventually he's going to get signed. That scares me as for the shortstop market, because the money, over $1 billion, guys, in this offseason alone, Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson, Trey Turner. I mean, the money is just flying off the shelves for shortstop. So it worries me for where Willie stands, because even if Willie's not on that tier, which I think he is defensively and offensively, I don't think they're going to be close to him either. And what do you do with him? I mean, and that's why I said before, when we start this podcast about a month ago, more questions than answered, but that's just the off season, and we'll sort that thing out. The one thing we do know for sure, the one thing we can all agree on, we are Brewers fans, and we just want to see wins. Did you guys have fun on this episode?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It was, those that are folks that are listening, and if you want to join in on one of these, just send me a message. But I told them we're going to have a nice free flowing conversation. We get to know a little bit about each other, bring Brewers fans together. So I appreciate you guys joining me and having an open conversation and chatting about our Milwaukee Brewers. A huge, huge, huge thank you to both of you. Super glad to get the fans of this show and really just fans of the Milwaukee Brewers on this podcast, because again, you guys make this show. I've said that before. It's not me. It's you guys, your support, your views on YouTube, your thumbs up over there on YouTube, you downloading the episode, you interacting on Twitter. That is you guys and not necessarily me. So I appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope everyone here had a little bit of fun along the way. We got to learn a little bit about each other. If you guys enjoyed this episode, if you're listening in, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, wow, that is really cool, Brandon is really handsome. No, I'm just kidding. You can join me. Just drop me a DM on Twitter or on Facebook. On Facebook at Locked On Brewers Podcast, and I'll get you on. I'd love to chat with you guys. We have all off season to go. And of course, said it, we still got the regular season and going into the playoffs. I'll get fans on throughout the course of the season. Thank you all for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On Brewers podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. We are on Twitter. We are on Facebook at Locked On Brewers. You can follow myself on Twitter if you so do. I tweet a lot about the Bucks and the Packers as well. So just be careful, know what you're getting into at Brandon_Snide. Thank you for making Locked On Brewers your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he is going deep on the MLB Stars of Tomorrow. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Coming up next week, unconfirmed, but I'm going to tease it, a current Brewer and a former Brewer possibly joining the show, and another edition of this type of episode, Fan Feature Friday. I had so much fun. I hope all of you did as well. Until next time, stay safe, stay warm. If you're like Levi, put the air conditioning on because it's 70 degrees. That's air conditioning weather. And as always, go Brewers.